Hi, friends. Thank you for listening in today. This is the audio version of Chapter 4 of Pieces of Purple, and in it, we'll explore the missionary culture, particularly as it relates to something I call the tyranny of shoulds. As usual, in about 2 weeks, although I'm trying to get these out more quickly this year, I'll release a videoed conversation with an adult MK in which we'll further discuss the topics covered in this chapter. Of course, the audio of that chat will appear here as a podcast episode, but you can actually watch those conversations on YouTube now. To view podcast videos, follow the link to the Pieces of Purple YouTube channel in this episode's notes, and make sure you subscribe to it so you don't miss any of the upcoming fare. You'll also find links to my website, my contact information, and the book's Amazon page in the notes. Remember that the printed version of the book contains poetry, discussion questions, and quotes from over 50 MKs that you will not be hearing in these recordings. And now, here is Pieces of Purple, Chapter 4, The Missionary Culture. What is a global nomad's purple made of? Most TCK models point to two principal influences that shape their sense of self and of the world: their adoptive culture, or cultures, and their passport culture, or cultures. But in my work with MKs, I've discovered that we can actually add a third major cultural influence to the mix: the missionary culture. In his book, Primitive Culture, English anthropologist Edward Burnett Tyler defines culture as that complex whole which includes knowledge, belief, art, morals, law, custom, and any other capabilities and habits acquired by man as a member of society. I think you'll agree that most communities of missionaries are made up of individuals who generally share similar views on knowledge, belief, morals, customs, capabilities, and habits. Based on that, there is no doubt in my mind that for missionaries' kids, the world of ministry is indeed a formative culture. Missionaries are generally fueled by faith, devoted to service, frugal, resilient, risk-takers, problem-solvers, and usually more conservative than their passport and adoptive cultures, to name just a few of their characteristics. Frugality may be the trait I remember most starkly. I grew up watching my mom turn one chicken into 5 meals for a family of 4, save the salt that collected at the bottom of pretzel bags to flavor her soup, because salt is so expensive, and make errand days into exhausting 15-stop runs to avoid wasting gas on several shorter trips. I may not be as frugal as she is, but I know that many of the values I witnessed growing up as a missionary's kid embedded themselves in my purple, equipping me for adulthood in a way I'm still uncovering today. I loved so much about those early years, and I learned so much from them. But beyond frugality and the high call of serving others in the name of Jesus, there were some less positive aspects of the MK experience that I didn't fully become aware of until much later. As I mentored my students at Black Forest Academy, the one aspect of the MK world that revealed itself as a dangerous threat to the well-being and faith of missionaries' kids was the tyranny of shoulds. Shoulds are the unrealistic and unachievable expectations perceived by most MKs that they must be exceptional in every way. Why? Because their families serve and represent God, and because He and the world are watching. 2 years ago, I spoke at an MK reunion in Georgia and broached this topic with the young and older adults in attendance. The minute I began to describe the tyranny of shoulds to them, I saw their eyes widen in recognition. Putting a name to the pressure they'd felt all their lives was a perspective-shifting thing. I sent one of them to the boards at the front of the room and asked the group to shout out the shoulds they'd felt as children and even still experienced as adults. Within 10 minutes, we'd filled 2 whiteboards with every should they could identify from their past and current lives. This is just a portion of their sobering list. I should be mature, be happy, not admit to struggling, be able to fit in, be fluent in another language, be perfect, pretend everything is okay, never complain, be a spiritual superstar, be okay with being sad all the time, not upset anyone ever, be interesting, make friends with all the supporters, always behave, understand all cultures, be grateful. There were high fives and laughter and groans as they one-upped each other with the intensely felt but preposterous expectations that had carved their way into their self-perception. You might wonder how shoulds are different from regular family rules and guidelines. Here's how. Rules and guidelines assume that growth will happen through practice, that grace will be needed for the ups and downs of the process, and that second chances will be extended to children who are prone, as we all are, to learning through trial and error. With rules and guidelines, there's a tacit understanding of apprenticeship. Shoulds hold no such nuance. Their subtext is, these are the mandates we are heaping on your shoulders as an inflexible expectation. You're an MK, not a regular kid. You don't get to be frail or confused or lacking self-control. If you fail to live up to these shoulds even once, you'll be stained forever in the eyes of anyone who matters, your parents, your community, and your maker included. Family rules and guidelines expect growing pains along the way to maturity. Shoulds reject developmental growth and demand instant perfection instead. They can be taxing and damaging to young, eager-to-please hearts. Some MKs learn to manage the shoulds early in life, often with the help of parents who are aware of the pressures. Others, perhaps because of personality type or an independent spirit, are able to let them go as they grow into their autonomy. Yet others might still hear the shoulds speaking from their subconscious, but recognize them as irrational, and they've learned to quiet them. As demonstrated by that group of MKs in Georgia, though, some, dare I say many missionaries' kids, are still tormented not only by the demands of perfection that shaped them, but also by the weight of their failure to live up to them. If you ask MKs where these shoulds came from, they might be hard-pressed to give you a clear answer. They might say they sense them from their sending mission, their partner churches, their supporters, their missionary community on the field, their relatives back home, their own family, or a combination of all of those. Many won't even be able to point to a clear articulation of the outrageous and unrealistic expectations. They just knew they were there, looming over them. It's astonishing how many MKs end up inflicting the oppressive pressure of shoulds on themselves. The external tyranny becomes an internal tyranny before they even realize it, because they feel so inordinately responsible as MKs to protect their parents, their ministry, and God's reputation. I recently sent out an informal survey to adult MKs, asking them to identify the most intense shoulds they experienced as children, and might even still feel as adults. In order of decreasing percentage, the top 5 were these. I should behave well at all times. I should be exemplary in every way. I should not cause my parents more stress. I should have a mature faith. I should serve others until I have nothing left to give. Imagine what kind of pressure those 5 shoulds alone impose on a primary school student who is struggling with life in a fishbowl, in a place where her family is seen as the embodiment of Christ. What they might mean to the 10-year-old whose family is visiting financial partners and churches, weary from the travel, but aware that all eyes are on him. Or to the 12-year-old whose family has just moved for the 4th time, who feels uprooted, lost, insecure, and buzzing with the kind of stress that makes her want to scream and lash out. Imagine what those shoulds might feel like to the teenager whose depression is beginning to manifest itself in visible ways, or whose behind closed doors family life is the antithesis of what they project publicly, or who has witnessed horrors or been abused and doesn't know what to do with the trauma. Or the MK who is just trying to make the fraught transition from childhood to adulthood under complicated circumstances, but is convinced that one wrong move witnessed by others will bring a deluge of shame, reproach, and punishment he might not be able to withstand. It's important to note that the shame so many MKs carry is not necessarily attached to actual failures. Far too often, it is their mere propensity to fail that traps them in an intense conviction of their own defectiveness and unworthiness. Simply being human cements their view of themselves as nothing more than fallen. The impact of that certainty, especially in their developmental years, is immeasurable. The 5 shoulds that topped that survey, they could form an escape route for the MK yearning for freedom from shame if they were capable of achieving them. They are significant in what they convey. 1, I should behave well at all times. Other kids can be less than perfect, but because I'm an MK, I cannot. I need to be consistently above reproach. If somebody sees me throwing a tantrum or talking back to my parents or not telling the truth or being mean to another kid or doing poorly in math class or being depressed, I have failed. I cannot do any of that at any time because it might bring shame to my family, their mission, and God Himself. 2, I should be exemplary in every way. Not only should I behave well at all times, but I should be the person people point to and say, see her? She's the kind of person we want our kids to be. She's so mature, so respectful, so adaptable, so competent, so positive, so servant-hearted. So I don't just need to be good, I need to be extraordinary, held up as an example for others to follow. And if I fall short of these expectations, as unrealistic as they might be, my failure will bring shame to my family, their mission, and God Himself. 3, I should never cause my parents more stress. They're already under so much pressure. I can tell they're exhausted and overwhelmed. If I tell them that I'm struggling, or if I misbehave and take too much of their time and attention, it will distract them from their important work and cause them even more stress. I need to be a good little soldier and take care of myself, because they're engaged in God's ministry, and I shouldn't hinder it. I shouldn't express my struggles and hurts to them, because taking their eyes off their ministry might bring shame to, you guessed it, my family, their mission, and God Himself. 4, I should have mature faith. I know I'm only 6. I know I'm only 9. I know I'm only 14. But my family's work for God is what defines us. How can they bring Jesus to the people they serve and have a child at home with a fledgling faith? Or worse, an uncertain faith? I need to talk about Jesus confidently with others, even if it isn't natural for my personality type. I need to want to read my Bible and want to have daily devotions. I need to know more about God and scriptures than any other kids my age because I'm an MK. And if I don't excel in everything, including my faith, I might bring shame to my family, their mission, and God Himself. 5, I should serve others until I have nothing left to give. God doesn't call us to have healthy boundaries that protect us, our relationships, and our faith. I've seen it in nearly every missionary I've met. We're called to pour out every ounce of what we have to give, whatever the cost. So I should stuff down any impulse to rest or recharge, because self-sacrifice is always good and laudable. Whether I'm a kid or an adult, I am here to invest myself limitlessly in others. And anything less than that might, yes, bring shame to my family, their mission, and God. As nearly universal as an MK's love for growing up between worlds might be, so are the recognized and unrecognized shoulds that anchor themselves to our self-awareness and worldview in both benign and malignant ways. We must do better at recognizing and contradicting them, lest they become a lifelong influence on how we evaluate ourselves, our families, our faith, and our Savior. To be honest, I still occasionally catch myself feeling defective for not living up to the irrational expectations that gripped my childhood. When the shame starts creeping up on me, I need to repeat to myself over and over the unassailable facts I now know to be true. I am a precious human being, created by God, imperfect, still learning, and worthy of His love. My value is not dependent on behavior or performance. My self-esteem does not hinge on the approval of others. I will feel no guilt for doubt or nonconformity, but seek honest answers as I embrace the uniqueness God Himself created in me. I will try again when I stumble, because growth is a continuum, and grace is God's way. I will reject the straitjacket of irrational performative shoulds and look instead to make right choices and love well. If we can change our internal semantics from should to something more generous and positive, like get to, or can choose to, or even want to, our entire perspective will change. We'll be able to view options as opportunities, not single challenge tests that instantly label us worthy or unworthy. Passport culture, adoptive culture, missionary culture. So many marrow-deep influences that inflict as many pressures as they offer opportunities. Even a commonplace dilemma, like being given money to buy ourselves a meal, can get filtered through all three lenses. An MK who grew up in Ethiopia might favor that culture, putting those funds towards some Wat and Tibbs, and be transported home by the familiar savors. If he's Canadian, he might lean into his passport culture and use the money on a healthy serving of poutine. But if the frugality of his missionary upbringing is speaking most loudly, he might opt to buy a half-dozen cheap ramen packages, thus covering several meals for the price of one restaurant treat and saving the change for other needs. This type of processing is instinctive. We juggle the pieces of our identity subconsciously, prioritizing the one that seems most pertinent to a current situation. And it goes beyond wondering what to do with funds designated for a meal. We apply the same multifaceted reasoning to more serious aspects of our lives as well, like our response to crises, relationships, career ambitions, budgeting, and other life priorities. Third culture kids are complex individuals locked in an often lifelong apprenticeship of finding wholeness despite our dissonant parts, or within those dissonant parts. Even if we learn to show a simpler image to the world around us, our inner kaleidoscope might still be turning, projecting ever-changing patterns of our multiple identities on the screens of our deepest self. Thank you for listening in today, friends. Make sure you check the show notes for all the links I mentioned earlier, and please share these resources with any churches or friends or relatives who might benefit from them. And remember that you can go back and catch earlier chapters of Pieces of Purple on this podcast platform or on YouTube. I hope you'll check back in a couple of weeks for a meaningful conversation with an adult MK about the missionary culture. As I release this episode into the world today, I want you to know that I celebrate the purple you are, or the purple you love. Thank you for listening.